Hello, friends, and welcome to your next station. At this station, you are going to be walked through the process of writing a body paragraph. This station is actually going to be super important because it's kind of like last week. At the end of the week, we wrote an introduction paragraph independently. You're going to be doing the same thing at the end of this week. You will be writing a body paragraph independently. And this station is particularly important for that because I'm going to be walking you through step by step the steps that you should follow when you are writing your own body paragraph. Before we jump in here and get started, hopefully you already got a copy of the paper out of the folder. If you have not already done that, you need to go ahead and do that. You need to make sure you have a pencil ready to go. And I'll say this now and I'll try to remember to say it again at the end of the video. You are not necessarily gluing anything into your notebook at this station. However, you are going to keep the paper that you complete at this station. And my advice to you would be to put it somewhere safe so that when we do get to that point later this week where you are writing an introduction paragraph independently, you can refer back to this station that you did today as a reference or as a tool that you can use to help you with that process. With all that being said, we are going to go ahead and jump in here and get started. This particular station does have a passage that goes along with it. You don't have a copy of the passage, but you do see it here on the screen. And so I'm going to ask that you would follow along with me as I read this passage. It is titled, Should School Start Later? Experts say a later schedule could be good for your health by Maggie Pierce. Your phone shrieks. Confused and groggy, you open your eyes. Surely it isn't time to get up already. You tap snooze, sink back into dreamland until your dad knocks on the door. Wake up, he calls. The bus will be here in 10 minutes. You groan. 5 more minutes. Please, please, please. If this sounds familiar, you aren't alone. Before the pandemic, nearly 70% of teens weren't getting enough sleep. In years past, things were different. Many teens were able to sleep in because remote classes started later, didn't require a commute, or gave students flexibility in their schedules. But now that in-person school has resumed, teens across America are once again battling their alarms, and a debate has reignited. Should school start later? The science of sleep. In the US, the average start time for middle and high school is a few minutes after 8 a.m. It hasn't always been this way, though. A century ago, most schools started around 9 a.m. Then, in the 1970s, districts began shifting to earlier schedules for teens, with elementary kids starting later. This saved districts money because it reduced the number of buses needed. When start times are staggered, the same buses can make multiple trips. Otherwise, you need enough buses to transport all elementary, middle, and high school students at once. Today, we know much more about teens and the science of sleep. Scientists now understand that adolescents experience something called phase delay. Here's how it works. At night, our bodies release a hormone called melatonin that makes us sleepy. Around middle school, this melatonin release gets pushed back by 1 or 2 hours. As a result, many teens have a hard time falling asleep before 11 p.m. If you have to start school at 8 a.m., it can be tough, if not impossible, to get the 8 to 10 hours of sleep you need to be healthy. And that's a problem. If teens aren't getting enough sleep, it's going to impact every aspect of their life, says Dr. Lisa Melzer, a sleep psychologist. Indeed, being exhausted can make you cranky and sad. It can make it harder to concentrate, sit still, and learn. And it can weaken your immune system and impede your ability to make good decisions. Given how critical sleep is to your well-being, it's no surprise many experts recommend that middle and high school start no later than 8:30 a.m. Benefits and drawbacks. In 2017, Cherry Creek School District in Colorado pushed back start times for its middle and high schools. Since then, students have said they are less sleepy during the school day and participate more in first period. Metzler, who led a study of Cherry Creek students, found that kids were sleeping more and they stopped falling asleep during their homework. Over the past few years, hundreds of other schools have also experimented with later start times. The results have been promising, with students feeling more alert and fewer incidents of tardiness. If later start times are good for teens, why doesn't everyone make the switch? Unfortunately, it's not so simple. For one thing, starting later means ending later, which leaves less time for after-school activities like sports, dance, and music. For outdoor activities, this is especially problematic during the winter when daylight hours are limited. Later dismissal times could also cut into after-school jobs and create scheduling conflicts for families. In Cherry Creek, some families say they have less time in the evening for homework and for dinner. Transportation is another obstacle. Later start times could require some districts to invest in additional buses and drivers, which can be costly, and many parents might not be able to drive their kids to school before work. Of course, early start times aren't the only reason that teens are exhausted. Many things can get in the way of a good night's sleep, such as caffeine, stress, overscheduling, and too much screen time. Still, the benefits of a later start time are compelling. So, what do you think? Should more schools start later? The prompt for this passage says, in 2017, Cherry Creek School District in Colorado pushed back start times for its middle and high schools. Since then, students have said they are less sleepy during the school day and participate more in first period. Over the past few years, hundreds of schools have also experimented with later start times. The LaRue County School Board is considering a similar policy. Is this a good idea? Should school start later? Write an essay in which you debate this topic. Include evidence from the provided passage to support your ideas. Okay, now obviously we are not going to be writing an entire passage or an entire essay. We are only focusing on one body paragraph. And for this body paragraph, I have provided you a thesis statement that says, school should not start later because, remember with our thesis statements, we always want to give 2 reasons why we feel that way. So my first reason is because it would create too many scheduling problems. And then my second reason is it would cause transportation issues for buses. If we look here, our body paragraphs are always going to start with a transition word and a topic sentence. We're going to be filling in the transition word here in just a second, but let's look at the topic sentence first. School should not start later because it would create too many scheduling problems. I want to remind you guys that when we're coming up with our topic sentences, we get those ideas from our thesis statement. So if we look back, the first reason in our thesis is that it would create too many scheduling problems. So that is exactly where I got the idea for my topic sentence. And since this was the first idea that was mentioned in the thesis, that tells me that this would be the first body paragraph. So to me, it makes the most sense if we're thinking about what kind of transition word to use here. We would want to make sure we use the word first. I want to point out that we do have a comma after our transition word. I've given that comma to you, but just remember later this week when you are writing your body paragraph on your own that after that transition, you should have a comma. Now, remember, our topic sentence lets us know what the rest of the paragraph is going to be about. So everything that we cite from the text, all of our E1s, our E2s, where we're explaining our evidence, need to be focused on the topic of scheduling and how if we had school start later, people are going to have issues with their schedule. So with that being said, let's move on to our E1. I have actually already pulled out a piece of evidence from the text. It says, for one thing, starting later means ending later, which leaves less time for after-school activities like sports, dance, and music. But in this E1, there are a couple of things missing that we're going to add. And I want you guys to remember that I'm adding these things here, and when you write your body paragraph on your own later this week, you will be expected to include these things. So anytime we have an E1, our evidence, we always want to make sure we have a good sentence starter. And my old faithful, the one that I always use, is the text says. And notice here we have a comma again. But there's some more punctuation that we need to make sure that we include, and that is quotation marks. We use quotation marks to show that this is not something that we came up with, but that instead this is something that came from the text. And we put those quotation marks at the beginning of the quote and at the end of the quote. So I purposefully left those quotation marks off of your paper, and you need to make sure that you add them. Now that we have our transition word, we have our topic sentence, we have our first E1, we're going to move on to our E2. And remember, the job of the E2 is to explain, because that's what an E2 is, it's an explanation. We are explaining how does this piece of evidence prove that if we have later start times, there are going to be scheduling issues. And we want our E2s to be at least 2 sentences. If you are ever stuck and you are not sure how to start your E2, my old faithful for this one is this evidence shows, or you could say this evidence proves, and then tell me, what does it prove to us? So for here, this is what I've said. This evidence shows that if school ends later, students might not be able to take part in the activities they enjoy because they're scheduling issues, right? That's what we're proving up here in our topic sentence. Some families might even stop letting their children participate altogether if it means getting home too late and missing out on family time. Remember, our E2s need to be at least 2 sentences. I've already said it once. You'll probably hear me say it a few more times before the end of the video. The E1s come from the passage. The E2s come from your brain. We are not done. We need to have another E1 and another E2, but before we get into that, we always use an internal transition in our body paragraphs. Remember, the job of the internal transition is to help our audience move from this first E1 and E2 to our second E1 and E2. We have a few options here. I like using the word furthermore or additionally. And I've already got this comma here for you. But again, just remember when you are writing your body paragraphs later this week that I will be looking for that comma. All right, so now we need another piece of evidence from the text that shows that if school starts later, it's going to cause scheduling issues. Here's what we've got. Later dismissal times could also cut into after-school jobs and create scheduling conflicts. Ding, ding, ding. There's that keyword for families. So same sort of situation here. This is a piece of evidence that I pulled straight from the text, but we are missing a few key things here. First of all, we need a sentence starter. I'm going to put for this one, the text also says. Since we've already used the text says once, I'm adding the word also here to let my audience know that, hey, this is the second piece of evidence that I'm citing. And just like last time, we want to make sure we add our quotation marks right in front of the first word of our quote and then right behind the second word of our quote. So make sure that you add those quotation marks on your copy that you have. All right, now we're moving on to our E2. Remember, with the E2, we are explaining how does our evidence, how does our E1 prove that our topic sentence is true? And I'm going to give you another sentence starter that I like to use with my E2s. We said this evidence shows. For this one, let's say this evidence demonstrates. That's another fantastic way to start your E2s. This evidence demonstrates many families depend on these jobs to help support themselves or their families. If school lets out later, students won't have as much time to work, and this could cause financial problems, right? So I'm explaining all of the reasons why having that later start time is going to cause scheduling issues and why that's going to be bad for students. Remember, our E2s, we want them to be at least 2 sentences, and those come from our brain, not from the passage. Last but not least, we have our concluding sentence. The job of the concluding sentence is to just wrap up your paragraph, put a nice pretty bow at the end. My favorite way to start a concluding sentence is to use the word clearly, and we have a comma there. Clearly, and this is where we're just driving home the point that we made in our topic sentence, changing the school start time would hurt students more than it would help them. So I'm just reminding my audience one more time at the end that this is not a good idea. This is what a completely, fully written body paragraph should look like. It's a little more detailed than an introduction paragraph, but that's okay. Please make sure that you have everything that you see on mine written on yours, and once you've done that, you are finished with this station and you will be ready to rotate shortly.